We are on the air. Welcome to 12-3 Marketing's virtual ACT users groups. Today's topics is group building. And what group building is, groups are, excuse me, collections of contacts, not collections of opportunities or companies, just people. But it's a way for you to build subsets of your database so that you can either run reports, schedule activities, or most importantly, do email marketing. You can imagine if you're sending out a newsletter via email marketing, you don't want to usually send it to everybody in the database. You want to send topical stuff to people interested in that topic. So you need to segment your database a little bit. Try to identify people who would have interest in a certain topic. And so we're going to, next week's session is about using ACT marketing, and we feel that before you can send a newsletter out, you need to build a group of who's going to get the newsletter. So we're going to kind of focus on that. We're going to talk about group building in general, but having groups is good for running reports, looking at just your piece of the database, the piece you care about, or doing any kind of advanced searching. We're going to use ACT V18 today, and we're going to use the ACT 2016 demo database, which everybody gets a copy of. It's a couple hundred names in this database, not a lot of people. So let's talk about I'm in the contacts part of the database, and so I've looked up all contacts, and there are 213 people, and we can see that some people are employees, and they're in New York. There's different kinds of people in the database. There's an employee. I'm just scrolling through. Here's an influencer, reseller in Australia. Different people in the database, and your database might have thousands and thousands of people. Some are competitors, some are leads, some are prospects, some are your best customers, some buy this, some buy that. And so we are going to build groups based on different things, and I'll just make some stuff up as we go. If we go to the groups section of ACT, you'll see I'm in contacts right now. If I go to groups, I'll get a list of groups. ACT comes with about 7 groups pre-built. We've added some in here. There are 2 ways to build groups. It gets a little bit technical, but it makes sense as you go. There's what's called static groups and dynamic groups. Static memberships of a group are just you put people in a group. An example are my top 10 clients. We could just build that group manually, but it means you have to maintain it. So I'll show you how to do that first. I'm going to build a new group, and I'm going to call it my 2016 target accounts. So these are the people I want to reach out to in 2016 and convert to customers. So I've built a group here. I'll save it. However, the group is empty of contacts. It's brand new. It has nobody in it. So what I have to do next is I have to go to Add Remove Contacts under the Contacts tab. And this little window pops up, and it says there's 2 halves. The top half says Static Membership, and this is what we're going to do right now is create a static group. Static groups never change unless you change them. That's why they're static. And so right now there are no contacts in the group, but if I click on this contacts button, I get an alphabetical list of all the people in the database. And I can just move them over into my group. So here's the first one is George Agan. I hit the little arrow, and now he's a member of the group. I can come down here to Billy Clark, hit the arrow, add him to the group. If I decide I don't want George to be a member of the group, I can hit this to the left arrow, and it moves him back into the list. So I could just scroll down the list, look at the name. Here's Lucy Connor, add her to the group. That could be a lot of work. If I was looking at a database yesterday, it had 70,000 names in it. That's a long list to look at. So if I know the names, I could actually search for it. And it searches by, right now, kind of hard to see, but there's a little arrow here, which means I'm sorted by their last name. If I type in Smith, you'll see it took me right down to Howard Smith, so I can add him to the group. So I could search by last name. I'll type in a Jones. We don't have a Jones, but we've got Eric Johnson. Add him to the group. See if anybody starts with a Q. Anthony Quicksnow. Add him to the group. So if, by the way, if I wanted to sort this by company, I just click on the company header, and now this list is sorted alphabetically by company. So I know 5 people at A1 Services. I guess I'll pick Andy Harrison. I could pick all 5 if I wanted. There's no limit to the size of a group. You could have a group with 50,000 people in it or more. If I say OK, my group is built. Say OK again. And now under contacts, I've got the 6 people I built in this group. This group will never change unless I go in here and remove more people. So that's a good example of, target accounts. I might want to just go through the list and build a group of people, applying my own intelligence to the list. There's a couple other ways to add people to a group, and so I'm going to show you that. I'm going to leave the group section, go back to contacts. Let's say I'm on a contact. I keep getting this error. I hope it doesn't crash out on me, but let me go look up somebody named Sam. There's Sam McCord at Duke Industries. If I go down to groups and companies, I can see what groups he's a member of. And he's not a member of any groups right now. But I can add him to some groups from here. So I go to add remove groups. And I'm on Sam's record. So here's a list of all my groups, and there's my target accounts group. So now what I'm doing is I'm adding him to the target accounts group. And maybe I want to put him in my needy board member group too. I can add him to multiple groups from here. So what I did before was I was on the group and I added contacts to it. Now I'm on a contact and I'm adding groups to the contact. 2 ways of doing everything, at least. So now Sam is a member of these 2 groups, 2016 target accounts. If I click on that group, I'm back in the groups part of ACT, and you can see Sam is now a static member of my group. He'll be on there until I take him off. So that's a static group. You can imagine if I needed to get, if I had a large database and I want to mail out 10,000 newsletters, it would be kind of a lot of work to add, to build a static group of 10,000 people. But you could. I think I'll show you how to use the group later on as we get them built. But that's a static group. Pretty straightforward. Sometimes you want to build a group based on a rule, and that's called a dynamic group. A dynamic group, you are a member of the group based on criteria. And so I am going to say we're going to build a group called customers. I actually have one here already, but we'll build another one. So I'm going to hit the new button, create a new group. And we'll call it customers. So again, my group is empty. If I wanted to, I could go through and manually pick out all the customers, but then when I added in, if I sold something to somebody new tomorrow, I'd have to remember to add them to the group. So groups kind of get stale if you don't maintain them all the time. So another way to identify customers, if I go back to contacts here, let me just save my little group. It's already there. I'll call it customers February 23rd. Doesn't want to have 2 groups with the same name. Good for ACT. Anyway, my group is empty. But I'll go back to contacts here, and in the ID status, if someone's a customer, we put in here that they're a customer. So what I really want to do is just search for anybody who has the word customer in this field. So I go to groups. I'm now going to go to add remove contacts. I could statically add all my customers in here, a lot of work. Dynamically, it says members are dynamically added or removed based on the group's membership criteria. So I am going to edit the criteria. And this little interface takes a little bit of getting used to, but I'm looking for a contact whose ID status field, and this is where it gets a little tricky. I could say equal to customer, but that guy we were just looking at, he's not equal to customer. He was influencer and customer. So I'm really better off using contains, which means it contains the word customer. Could be anywhere in there. Could be the only thing, could be one of three, could be the last thing of four. And so I have this rule now that says if the ID status says customer, and so I have a rule. And this is a very simple rule, but we can add many more rules in here. And so I will preview this. And it found 73 customers. Here's a guy who's a customer and a vendor. Here's a guy who's a customer and an influencer. So you see if I had changed this rule, let me edit this rule. I'm going to hit edit. And let me change this to just customers. Must be equal to customer, and now it says equal to customer, and if I preview that, the number goes down to 63. These are people who are customers and only customers. So slightly different rules here, and you got to get used to, you know, searching and thinking how a computer thinks. Anyway, I'm going to double click on this and change my operator back to contains, because I just wanted to say contains customer. You got to be careful with how you set up a database. You might have an entry in there that says former customer. Well, that contains the word customer, but they're not really customers anymore. So then the search for the word customer wouldn't really give you the results you want, because the word former changes everything, or ex-customer. So the preview here lets you see what you're going to get. Now I'm going to preview this, and I'll go back to 73, and I can see that I'm getting some people in here. So maybe I have to write some further rules to clean this out, but I'm just going to say okay again, and now I have a group of customers, and it's got 73 contacts in it, and there they are. If I were to go back to contacts here, sorry, I keep getting that error, I don't know why. Let me look up all contacts. And here's an ID status. So we have a guy right here. I don't know who it is, but he's a prospect. So let's go to his record. Nick Charles at the Continental Detective Agency. He's a prospect. Let's say today he bought something, and so we change him. I'll uncheck prospect and I'll check customer. I'll save that. And now when I go back to groups, that's an add-on we write for our database. There's Nick Charles right here at the Continental Detective Agency. So by keeping his ID status current, his membership in the group was automatically added. And you see I have another group down here called prospects. He was probably in here because his ID status would have said prospect. He just disappeared out of prospects, but he magically appeared in customers. And so that's why these groups are dynamic. I now have 74 members in my group. Tomorrow I might have 76. It all depends. Every day your database gets added to or gets deleted. And so the dynamic groups, that's what makes them dynamic, is membership is based on a rule. Whereas my target will always stay at 7 unless I go in there and add people to it. A couple little gotchas. I'm going to go back to contacts here, and I'm going to go to Nick Charles. When I go to groups, it says he's not a member of any group. And we know he's a member of the customer group. So why don't I see him? It's because he's a member of a dynamic group, and dynamic groups don't display unless you click this button. The reason is dynamic membership is, it puts an overhead on the machine. And if you're not really caring about it, they don't want to have to query the database and find all the groups he might be a member of. But if I click on Show Dynamic Membership, there's a list of all the groups he's a member of. And you'll see there's customers February 23rd, key contacts. So he's not a member of any static groups, but he's a member of 7 dynamic groups. There's a contact edited within the last 30 days. We'll show you that group. So some people get confused. They go here and says he's not a member of a group. Well, he is. You just got to click on Show Dynamic Membership, and then he will be a member of a group. Now, a group can have members both static and dynamic. Right now, if I click on Add Remove Contacts, the only way to be a member of this group is to be a dynamic member. But I could go up to static here and add George Agan to it permanently, whether he's a customer or not. I could add Jacques Antoine here. And so these 2 people are members always. So a group can have a mix of static and dynamics. See, now I have 75. One of them must have been a customer already. So you can build a group out of static and dynamics. What I want to do now is show you kind of a useful group. So let's say this is customers and I want to send them all an email. But I notice not all of them have an email address. So I can't send an email to Jim Curtis because he doesn't have an email address. So I'm going to call this, that's the customers. Here's my customers, February 23rd. I'm going to call it with email. And I'm going to go to Add Remove Contacts. I need to add more criteria in here. And so my next criteria is going to be that the email address contains data. Basically, it means it's not empty, right? It has something in it. It might not be right, but it has something in it. So I add that to the list, and now I've got 2 rules. They're a customer and they have an email address. And if I preview that, we're down to 33 now because I have an and condition. Say okay, and so here's my list, and you'll notice now everyone has an email. So this is a good group to do an email blast to. These are customers and they have an email address. I'll have a much better success rate sending to this, right? I want to show you an or condition as well. So I'm going to build a group, brand new group. We're going to call it New England. Maybe this is a territory. If I could spell territory. And to be a member of this group, I could again go manually find everybody, but again, I'll be adding people tomorrow, and tomorrow the group won't be accurate anymore. So I really want to use criteria, and I kind of a pain. I'm going to hit S to just come down to the S's here. I want to look at the state, and if I say the state is equal to Maine, and then I got to do it again. And I'll say equal to Massachusetts. And I say Connecticut. We'll do one more. I won't do them all. You get the idea. State equal to Connecticut. And when I preview this, I get 0. And you go, why? You know, my boss told me to get everybody in Maine and Massachusetts and Connecticut. And you can see it says and that's the problem, is that no one can live in Maine and Massachusetts and Connecticut. What they're really saying when they want those 3 states is I want people who live in Maine. I want someone if they live in Maine or if they live in Massachusetts or if they live in Connecticut. So if I do that and I preview it, I got 1. I should look at my database more. Well, let's add 1 more person. We'll pretend California is now in New England. State equal to CA, add that to the list. The default is always and, so you got to remember to go in here and say or. Now I got 27 people because there's a lot of people in California. But anyway, this is the or rule, and so I'm adding multiple rules in here. And again, if I were to add someone tomorrow who lives in Maine, they would magically appear in this group. That's why the group is dynamic. And so I have my New England territory, and there they all are. Last thing I want to show you is you can mix your and ors. And so when do you use the parentheses? AJ, that's exactly where I'm going. I'm going to mix ands and ors. And I always like to bring up a little notepad screen here, so just give me a second and I'll bring up my OneNote. Hold on, it's right here. So if we all remember our algebra or our math, you know, there's the 1 plus 2 times 3. I always see this stuff on Facebook, you know, and you can arrive at different answers if you're not familiar with what's called the hierarchy of operations, but really 1 plus 2 times 3 is equal to 9, right? I just did it for me. You see the top one, it didn't do it for me. This is interesting, but if I do 1 plus 2 times 3, I'm not hitting the equals, I'm just hitting enter. Oh, it didn't do that. Equals 7. So the parentheses will tell you how to ands and ors get done. You want to be very careful. So let's go back to ACT and I'll show you an example. This is our New England territory, and let's say I want to say for a newsletter. So once again, I want to send an email blast, but not everybody here has an email. So I'm going to go back to my rule, and I'm going to add one final condition that says they got to have an email address. We've done this already. Wrong field. So email contains data. Add that to the list. So I say they're in Maine or Mass or Connecticut or California and their email contains data. And I preview it and I get 25. And in this case, it's working. But it might not always, because what it might give me is people in Maine. Well, you know what? I'll show you. So I've got 25 people, and it looks like they all have an email. Can't really tell their state. They're all in California. There's one in Connecticut. I'm going to go to contacts here, and I'm going to add a new guy called Joe Mainer. He's in Maine, and he has no email. I don't know where he went, but I know there he is, Joe Mainer. Okay. When I go back to my groups, I don't know if he'll be in there or not. He's in there. And he doesn't have an email address, so how did he sneak in there? Well, we don't know like what the hierarchy of operations is. It says here if he's in Maine, put him in. And what we really need to do is use these parentheses. I want to take all the states and put them inside parentheses. So now I'm saying state is this or this or this or this, and email contains nothing. And now when I preview it, Joe will disappear out of there. He's gone because he didn't have an email. So this takes experience to write. I don't want to gloss over it, but that's what the preview window is for, is if you don't get anything, you're doing something wrong. And end is always the end. I don't know if I can change that. Yeah, I can't. It's just end. I don't know why they give me a box there. Judy asked why use the end. So you have ands and ors, and that is saying, you know, I need them, people in New York or Pennsylvania who are customers. I do want to show you one last field that's really helpful in ACT, and you can build groups off of it. So I'm going to go back to contacts here, and let's just look at a you have in your act, either on the top half of the screen or sometimes they get moved down to the bottom half, you get these gray fields which say last activities. Depends on your layout where they are. And this tells me for Fred Fenderline here, the last time we met with him was October of 2006, and the last time we talked to him on the phone was 2009. You don't type these in. If you use ACT properly, big if, but if you use ACT properly, these fields get filled in for you. Watch, I'll go to history and I'm going to log a phone call and I'm going to say we said hi, everything is good, and I'm going to say okay. And now the date of last, it was a call attempt. Why did that do that? Did I not? Oh, call attempted, that's why. Let me say call completed. Everything is really good. And the date of last phone call automatically gets updated. And if I were to log a meeting, it would update to today. In fact, I'll do that. I'll come here, I'll do a meeting. I'll say that we met 3 weeks ago, did a product demo. And so, yeah, so here's the date of last meeting. So these fields are gray because you don't fill them in. ACT fills them in for you. And you can use these to help build your groups. So let me show you quickly 2 examples of groups that really everybody should use. First one I'm going to make it new, and I'm going to say people met with in last 365 days. And so I go down here to add remove contacts, and to be a member of this group, the date of last meeting, you'll see that the last meeting date is a field you can build a group off of. So I say last meeting is within the last 365 days. And if I hit OK, say OK, there's only one guy, Fred. But again, if I go to contacts here, and let's say I go down to this contact, Herman Getter, and I log a meeting today. I said hi. Yeah, forget these messages. It's because of a plugin I'm running. When I go back to the groups, now there's 2 people in my group. His membership in that group is dynamic. 365 days from now, these 2 people will drop out of my group because their last meeting date, if I haven't met with them, the last meeting date will be more than 365 days. So this is a rolling window of the last 365 days. So I could over here under my customers, I could say, instead of with email, I'm going to say falling through the cracks. And these are customers that we haven't talked to in a year. So let me hit remove contacts. I've got to edit this criteria, and I've got to say, I don't care about their email address now. I'm going to actually remove that requirement. But in here, I'm going to say last meeting is older than 365. Preview it. I've got 49 people who are customers, and look at the date of last meeting. So even the 2 guys I just met with this month will last meeting update from cleared entries on ACT calendar. No, actually, when you clear an entry, that's when the meeting gets completed. When it's on your calendar, it's something you intend to do, but you haven't done it yet. And when you clear it, then it becomes something that was done, and then the last meeting gets populated. Question from Donna. Now, you might think this is all we got to do, and I've got a list of people here, 49 people who we have met with, but we haven't met with them within a year. But really, there's other people we never met with. I've got another condition here, and this is where it gets a little tricky, but we can help you with this. We go to last meeting. There's some people where last meeting might be does not contain data. In other words, they were never met with. If I have a brand new record, that field's blank because there was never a meeting. And so I got to add that to the list. And of course, that's not an and condition because I can't have a meeting that's a year old plus be blank. So I'm going to put parentheses in here. And what I'm saying is, give me customers and either they have an old meeting or no meeting at all. So I've got to change this and to an or. And now instead of 49, I've got 73. You'll actually see as I scroll down here. Here's Billy Clark. He's a customer, never met with. And Angel and Bogey Kuhn, never met with. So you got to be a little careful. The first one, if I just look on the meeting date, that means there was a meeting, but it's old. Does not contain a date means there never was a meeting. And then you might want to include phone calls. So we got to add some phone call activity. Maybe we didn't meet with them in the last year, but we called them yesterday, and maybe that counts for something. So these groups are really powerful because I might add a line in here that says, and record manager is Geoff. And now these are Geoff's calls that are falling through the cracks. These are people we haven't talked to in a year. And so as a manager, I might want to say, hey, your job is to keep this group small. You'll actually see right now, this group has 73 people in it. Nick Charles is one of them. So I'll click on Nick Charles. I will call him, or I will meet with him. Did a demo again. And if I go back to the group, I'll be down to, come on. Oh, it looks like it's a good time to stop. My act is acting up. History. There we go, groups. My falling through the cracks group is now missing Nick Charles. However, in a year, he will magically appear. So that's the power of the group. Anyway, my main purpose for showing you groups today is that next week we want to send a newsletter out, and we really want to send a newsletter to a group. The nicest way to use that feature. And so you need to build groups. You need to identify who your customers are, what topic you're talking about, and then people with email addresses. This would be a bad group to newsletter because I don't have any email addresses. Okay, we're a little over 10 o'clock, so I'm going to unmute everybody. I'm going to stop recording now.